How I define my role as a policy advisor might be one of the more difficult questions that can be asked, because in my opinion, a policymaker is a linking pin between the worlds of schools, and in schools I mean pupils, teachers, school leaders, parents, and the political authority of a country, in my case the Flemish community. Students in schools, teachers in schools, are the final customers of all the policies in education that we're making. So it's very important to develop good relations, because of course as a policymaker you can't know everything. Teachers, school leaders, students, they're in classes every day, all the time. So we need their expertise in order to be able to work with our policy and to actually know what we're doing in policy making. At the same time, it's really important to communicate decisions that are made on a political level in a country back towards your stakeholders, back towards the pupils, teachers and school leaders in the classes, because it's important that they know which decisions have been taken, why they have been taken, and what the whole rationale behind these decisions was. Another important thing is that policies and teacher education should focus more on the professional continuum of teachers. The continuum of teacher education consists of first the initial teacher education, afterwards they will go through an induction periods when they start in schools, and their continuous professional development all over their career. And if you make policy in teacher education, you should focus on all these three areas at the same time and not on one. So it doesn't make sense, if you want to work more on teachers dealing with diversity, to only focus on initial teacher education or to only focus on the continuous professional development. They are a whole and they are interconnected. So in policy making, you should consider the continuum of the professional development of teachers. First of all, I think that collaboration with stakeholders should be much larger than it is right now in a lot of countries. They are really important that everyone is involved in the policy making on teacher education, that all stakeholders have their role and are able to take that role into the process. On the process of initial teacher education, we had a large policy evaluation a few years ago, but in order to follow this up or to develop this further, we did policy groups. And policy groups were actually composed of both teacher educators, teacher unions, researchers, and other experts, and they had the task to advise the Minister of Education and to actually work on what future teacher education would be, and they had to make their advice together, so they had to talk to each other. In my opinion, working with other European stakeholders, whether they're also policymakers or experts in teaching or university professors, it's very interesting and very important to the job I do, because it gives me information and it will work for my own professional development in order to learn new things and to develop my own education system further. The information they give me, the collaboration we have together, the learning we do together in these groups that are supported by the European Commission, it's very worthwhile and it's very important for the quality of work.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of the online live talk show that is being hosted by IT Clan BD called Join the Clan. My name is Ahmed Kabir Chaion and I work as the head of business at IT Clan BD. So a short introduction about IT Clan BD, an IT company in Bangladesh which is emerging, providing services of software development, web design, web development, customization in different technologies such as Laravel, WordPress and whatnot. And today, this particular episode focuses on nothing about IT indirectly, but rather on a particular technique that we know as making policies. And for that, I have along with me our esteemed guest. It's my privilege to introduce Mr. Dr. Asif M. Shahan, who's the advisor for local development and institutions network at Youth Policy Forum. A short bio I'll read through. Dr. Asif M. Shahan is currently working on as an associate professor at Department of Development Studies, University of Dhaka. He is a Fulbright Fellow and has a PhD in political science from George Mason University, where he has explored how the Government Accountability Office, or in short GAO, of USA managed to preserve its autonomy while being relevant in the policy process. He has worked on different issues related with administrative system, government performance, accountability, social protection, and governance of Bangladesh for more than 10 years. He has provided consultancy services to different agencies of the Government of Bangladesh, including the Prime Minister's Office, Cabinet Division, Ministry of Women and Children Affairs, PKSF, and international organizations including World Bank, UNDP, UNFPA, UNICEF, WFP, IDS, University of Sussex, Agropolis France, Swisscontact Bangladesh, BRAC Institute of Governments and Development, the Asia Foundation, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, which is and Centers of Public Service, George Mason University, etc. He is a member of SDG Advisory Committee convened by the Prime Minister's Office, Government of Bangladesh, and is currently leading a technical team that is working for designing the National Adolescent Strategy in Bangladesh. He has authored a number of book chapters and several journal articles in different peer-reviewed journals. Sir, it is my honor to welcome to the show and in the maiden episode of Join the Clan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, and thank you so much for inviting me. Looks like it's supposed to be a very exciting session. Hopefully, we're going to talk about policymaking and different aspects of policymaking in Bangladesh. Happy to be here, and yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for making time out of your busy schedule. So, in the introductory video, we had one of the teachers who were trying to emphasize on the fact that policymaking in education is important, and also he explained the role of a policy advisors. Let me first hear from you for our audience to understand what policy making is actually.
Well, in general, I mean, when we talk about policy, I mean, it's very difficult to define policy. I mean, in public policy, we often uses a term that what the government chooses to do or not to do, that will be defined as policy. But essentially, the problem with that definition, it makes everything too broad. I mean, from that perspective, everything is policy, and everything at the same time is not necessarily even doing, not doing something eventually become part of policy. But essentially, when we talk about policy, the key important thing that we need to remember that there must be a problem. There must be a problem which has to be a public in nature. By public means, I mean, the problem has to affect or influence a significant number of people. It's not necessarily something that is important to me, or a problem that is just affecting only a small group of individuals. That will essentially not necessarily become a part of problem. For instance, due to rain, I can't go outside of the home. That's my private problem. But due to rain and everything, if there is waterlogging, if there is issues that a large number of people are not necessarily being able to go outside and go to work and do their jobs, that essentially become the waterlogging issue, a public policy problem. So this is the key thing. This is the key understanding, that whenever we are trying to talk about public policy, it has to be a problem, and a problem has to be public in nature. That has to sort of cover a lot of people. Having said that, just because that there is a problem is there, and even if there is an understanding that it is a problem, it is there, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will become a part of the policy agenda. That something will essentially come into the radar or the network of the policymakers. By policymakers, I mean the political actors are significant, are important. The bureaucrats or the bureaucracy who is working in different ministries and divisions, they are important actors. So even after there is a problem, that problem has to reach to these specific actors. Once that problem is has come to their focus, then the real both art and science of policymaking start, because that's when the issue of collecting evidence, interpreting that evidence, considering that whether those evidences are feasible to sort of implement, the value of this evidence, those kind of consideration becomes into place. So from problem, something has to come into the agenda. That agenda has to be understood by a group of people. There has to be a certain degree of interest within them, and there will be evidence-based judgment based on which the whole thing works. So in short, when we talk about policy, it includes the whole scenario from that perspective.
All right, sir. The burning question: And the topic of today's discussion: do you consider policymaking an art?
Okay. Well, to be very honest, I will not necessarily. If it's not a binary. For instance, if you want to say that is public policy a science or an art, it's very difficult to sort of work in binary. It's science. It's of course a large part of policymaking is science, but at the same time there's a significant impact or significant art of policymaking is there. Let me just give you a few examples in this particular questions regarding this particular questions. Because whenever we, as I have already mentioned, that when we talk about policy has to be problem oriented. So, and at the same time, public policy has to be multidisciplinary in nature. By multidisciplinary, I mean that even if you talk about childhood obesity, even if you talk about child health or maternal health, it's not necessarily a simple question of health. There is a societal dimension to it. There is an economic dimension to it. There's a political dimension to it. So the question of health, whenever we're talking about obesity, it also sort of goes into the question that what the children are eating right now, whether there are regulatory framework which are in place to sort of regulate what the children are eating. So, when we consider those questions in general, the health sort of get mixed up with a different other sectors. So that's why I wanted to focus on that multidisciplinary aspect. At the same time, this is where the science issue of public policy making comes into place. That if we want to try to solve a problem, we need to come up with a number of options. There is just simply cannot be one option through which we can solve a problem. But when we're talking about different type of options, those options have to be substantiated. By substantiated, I mean there has to be evidence that this is something that will work in solving that problem. And when we talk about this evidence, this is where the science part comes into play. We have to sort of work with data. That data can be both quantitative and qualitative in nature. We have to sort of identify or explore a causal relationship that this is how things will change. So this is kind of the science part. But then here is the critical question. Here is where arts get very important. The thing is, to be very honest, for the political actors in any country, even if you just have evidence, that doesn't necessarily mean that that particular option will be considered by the political actors, because those political actors have their own choice, own calculation, own consideration. It doesn't matter, for instance, that how heavy or how critical the evidence on climate challenge is. For the political actors who are making their decisions, they will, in addition to the scientific factors, will also consider that how their individual decisions will affect their voters, their power, their staying power, and based on that, science will not necessarily persuade them to take a particular decision. This is where art of policymaking comes into place. By art, I mean that this is where we need to talk to them, make them understand in easy terms that what this evidence means. We have to sort of influence them, work with them, and negotiate with them, bargain with them. So the bargaining, the influence, the negotiation, and interpreting the evidence in actually sort of easy languages, this is where the issue of art comes into play. So science has a significant role, but just simple science of policymaking will not necessarily making a policymaking effective. It has to blend it with this art, the negotiation, bargaining, and everything. And in addition to that, just one point, the other thing is sometimes a problem will not necessarily draw the attention of the policymakers. Because we need to understand the political actors and the bureaucracy have to deal with thousands of problems every day. And they cannot actually sort of pay equal attention to all the problems. And this is where the art of policymaking comes into play, that this is where we need to sort of draw their attention that this is a huge problem which need to be addressed right now. If this doesn't getting addressed within a few years or within a short period of time, it will have a catastrophic repercussion. So those kind of discussions that actually become part of that art of policymaking.
Right. A lot of key points that you mentioned amongst what we had negotiation, we had data, we had science, all of those blend in to make this an art. So insightful of you explaining it to us. Let us shed the focus towards Youth Policy Forum. So my question, sir, is how is YPF creating an impact through promoting the practice on policymaking, and what are the benefits of it?
Okay, I think in terms of youth policy forum, I just want to point out, a few specific things. First of all, Youth Policy Forum, I think the way that I was talking about, that in terms of both art and science, Youth Policy Forum tries its best to blend those two. It has its different sections, different groups where those science generation things are actually going on. So when we talk about local government, when we talk about the health, when we talk about the COVID situation, when we talk about vaccinations, and when we talk about foreign relations, YPF has tried to sort of collectively bring together a lot of evidence to sort of point out, well, these can be the options that we can actually sort of consider. For instance, if you think about the Rohingya situations down there, YPF has organized several webinars where original research work has been presented by renowned political scientists and economists of the world to sort of point out what can be done. So in terms of generating evidence, YPF has played a huge role. The second thing that I point out, that not only just about generating evidence, in terms of presenting those evidence, in terms of reaching out to the policymakers to with this evidence to make sure that they have a clear grasp that what is going on. This is probably, I think, one of the key strengths of YPF. And to be very honest, in the context of Bangladesh, not very organizations are actually doing that, because there are a number of research organizations and think tanks, but most of them have ended their journey simply with just providing, or generating those evidences. But in terms of what to do with this evidence, and in terms of working with the government of Bangladesh to make sure that those evidence are actually being considered, YPF, I think, is something unique, because once you get that thing, YPF tried to sort of reach out to the government organizations. YPF has a specific network with the political leaders, the senior political leaders. It has a specific network with the bureaucracy to sort of identify how the bureaucracy is functioning and how the innovative practices of the bureaucracy can be incorporated within that. In other words, there is a partnership there. So that partnership actually helps YPF to sort of inform those knowledge that has been generated through the research, and as a result of that, create an impact, on the overall policymaking process. The third thing that YPF has done is I think, involving the actors. In terms of involving the actors, YPF at one end has actually sort of brought the youth of this country in the forefront. Because in general, we have a particular understanding that we don't necessarily need to listen to the youth. We do not necessarily listen to hear their voices, their perspective, their understanding of the policies. What YPF, I think, has critically, sort of made it clear over the years that the voices of youth are very important. And not only in terms of just raising that voice, but the quality of the voice. I mean, it's just not just simply shouting out loud in the street and making it point. It's just sort of, pointing out that, well, there is a quality in the voice that has been raised. There is a process and procedure that is being followed in sort of, making those voices heard. That is something YPF has done quite brilliantly. And then it's linking with that network. This is where the art part is coming into play, that working with the government, you have to criticize the government. That's fine. But that criticism has to be constructive so that you don't necessarily lose your partner. Because policy making is essentially a partnering position. So you can sort of criticize the government, but at the same time, you need to make sure that you have that working relationship with that, which I think YPF is. It's a very young organization. It's an organization that is being led by the youth, but I think they have shown brilliantly for a number of other research think tanks that how this can be done, how they can actually sort of provide a model in terms of doing that. And finally, as I say, that has been done with the help, with the evidence, because that is very important at the same time.
Yes, sir, you are right on point speaking about YPF, simply because I was in discussion with few other think tanks, including SANEM and the University of Bangladesh, Bangladesh University of Professionals, BUP, the Department of Economics, and they were supposed to be on this forum and share their views. Unfortunately, due to unavoidable circumstances, they could not show up. But yes, YPF has been there from the beginning of the discussion and conception of this discussion today. So thank you so much for that. Just for the understanding of our audience and our viewers, let us have a look at one of the videos that YPF has been promoting, the vaccine drive, where Dr. Shejuti Shaha speaks about the benefits of having the coronavirus vaccine. So we'll just take 2 minutes and we'll be back again to have the remaining questions answered from you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
আমি ডক্টর শেজুতি, বাংলাদেশের চাইল্ড হেলথ রিসার্চ ফাউন্ডেশনের একজন গবেষক। করোনা ভাইরাস প্যান্ডেমিকে সেই প্রথম থেকে আমার দল এবং আমি সিকোয়েন্স করে যাচ্ছি SARS-CoV-2 জিনোম এবং নজরদারি রাখছি ভেরিয়েন্টস গুলোর উপর। আপনাদের সবার মতো আমাদেরও সর্বক্ষণ মনে হয় কি উপায় মহামারী থেকে বের হবার? একটি উপায় টিকা। এই দ্বিতীয় দফায় দ্রুত রেজিস্ট্রেশন করে ফেলুন এবং টিকা নিয়ে নিন। সেটা যে টিকাই হোক না কেন, টিকা আমাদেরকে রক্ষা করবে করোনা ভাইরাসের গুরুতর উপসর্গ থেকে, সাহায্য করবে স্বাভাবিক জীবনে ফেরত যেতে। পড়াশোনায়, অফিসে বা ভ্রমণের জন্য এই টিকা জরুরি, কিছু ক্ষেত্রে বাধ্যতামূলক। আপনি যদি একটি ডোজ নিয়ে থাকেন, অবশ্যই দ্বিতীয় ডোজটা নিয়ে নিন, কারণ করোনা ভাইরাসের ক্ষেত্রে টিকার ডোজ সম্পূর্ণ করা খুবই জরুরি। এখন এই সংক্রমণের হার কমানোর জন্য টিকা নেয়া এবং মাস্ক পরার কোনো বিকল্প নেই। নিজে টিকা নিন, অন্যদেরকে টিকা নিতে উদ্বুদ্ধ করুন এবং মাস্ক পরুন।
Thank you so much for waiting. So the message is simply clear. We should all be aware of the benefits of having our vaccines, and YPF is doing an absolutely tremendous job for promoting the benefits on being vaccinated, and none other than saying it by or the ambassador for this is Dr. Shejuti Shaha. So sir, let's focus. Yes sir, of course sir.
No, I just want to point out. I mean, this is probably kind of captured that what I was saying, that YPF. Yes. Just look at the video that YPF has managed to engage one of the leading authorities of the world, in fact, in terms of understanding the value of the vaccination. And this is where Dr. Shah is coming with us, and we are honored and grateful to have her in the forum. But at the same time, just think about that it's not just simply about having a message, but that message has to relate to the citizens, to the mass, regarding the value of vaccination. So this is where bringing together global experts, sort of making a message which is understandable to the citizens in general, and then raising awareness. So it's not just it's bringing the policy and making it implementable, which can actually have a huge impact for the country. I think this is where I think the strength of YPF, that one single video actually shows the strength of YPF. I think. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely right, sir. And we're getting feedback from our viewers. Tawhidul is saying, let's keep wearing masks and stay safe together. Absolutely right on point. So now we're going to talk about the other part of the episode, which leads to the discussion on different competitions or like events that promote the practice of policy making. Could you kindly share with us of competition that you are aware of which promotes such kind of practices?
Right. I mean, to be very honest, let me start with my department, because I teach at Department of Development Studies. Before the COVID hit, because during the COVID there were lockdown, the offline classes are not there. We used to organize Development Expo. So in the Development Expo, I mean, in probably in 1 or 2 years, we held policy competition there, but which was mostly among the students, of the department. So that's one example where, and the idea was simple, that the students were supposed to identify a problem, and that can be any problem, and they can sort of, systematically identify the solutions and give us an idea that how that, solution can be implemented. And then I know that TIB has a YES group, YES group, and that YES group is working in different universities and focusing on transparency, accountability, and the institutions that are in charge of ensuring accountability. They have also, as far as I know, organized different competitions over the years, so with the YES group. And again, there probably, if I'm not mistaken, because I was involved in 1 or 2, that for each competition they try to sort of set a theme, and based on that theme, the participant groups, which and this is the the participant group is much larger than the development studies department that I was talking about, because the participants come from all over the country, and based on that, they try to sort of find out solution that how to ensure accountability and transparency and that. In addition to that, I know that Bangladesh University of Professionals just probably a few days ago, or probably yesterday or the day before that, they have a DevThon 2. So this is probably the second time they have organized policy case study competition. I was supposed to be there. Unfortunately, I had another engagement, could not go there. So, but I heard good things about that the students have tried to sort of do that. In addition to that, I know that FES, another organization which actually sort of also provide fellowship for policy recommendations, but it kind of have a detailed policy paper. So they do the students do primary research and everything, and based on that, it's a 6 months fellowship. So within 6 months, after 6 months, the fellows have to sort of present their papers. So as far as I know, there's 4 competitions that I'm aware of, but I'm sure that there are probably others which I'm not sure. But it's a growing field in Bangladesh. Yeah.
Right, sir. One thing I'm sure you, myself, the audience can agree that there is not much opportunities out there when it comes to making policies and the practice of it, or calling it an art. Students or young minds and scholars do not get too much opportunities apart from the actual work in policy making that they do, whether for the government or the local society and stuff. So there is this one event that we partnered recently, which was organized by the Department of Economics, Bangladesh University Professional, and the club UP Economics Club, which was called HOMAC 2.0. They had another one in 2019 before the pandemic happened, and there were 3 particular rounds. First round was submitting a policy based on an agenda, a theme, and then second round was pretty much finding faults in the policies of a pair. 2 teams would compete in between. They would try to point out what are the issues, and the top teams went on in the grand finale and they presented, sir. So just wanted to point out the benefits of having such organizations. Do you think the students are benefited when they take part in such events that we just spoke about?
Of course. I mean, there's no doubt about it. As you have rightly pointed out, I mean, there are a few problems that have been there. That first of all, we haven't necessarily, thinking about engaging our youths in the policy process. We have always thought that policy process is something that is the elderly or the experts will always have the upper hand in that particular area. So we haven't actually sort of trying to find out what their perspective is, what their viewpoint is. That's one thing. So when we're organizing this competition, it is actually creating an opportunity for them to be a part of that government. At the same time, I think another impact of this kind of competition, which I think we are not necessarily talking about that much, is the students are also understanding the complications, the complexities of policy making. Because in general, we have a tendency to sort of just speak ill of the government and say that, well, they're not doing anything, they do not understand, and we know a lot of things. I think the students, when they are participating in these competitions, when they're at least trying to sort of get a sense of the problem, they're trying to deal with that problem, finding out that it has multiple dimensions and a number of those things are actually beyond their control. This actually helps them to be aware of the challenges that the government face, the challenges that the bureaucracy face, and at the same time, the difficulties of policy making, which I hope and I think that at the end of the day, it will make them aware and it will help them to understand that how valuable the government service is, how important joining the services, and how important it is to make that service citizen friendly. I think this is a great contribution of the competitions. For some reason, we do not talk about that particular perspective that much, but I think it has a bigger role to play. The third thing that I want to just point out, that getting that idea, the fresh idea, the fresh perspective from the youth, which has always been missing. So from that perspective, I think those competitions actually help us to bring those particular perspectives under consideration. So
yes, sir, you're rightfully spoken. One thing that just came to my mind listening to you is that model United Nations, the concept of UN, and simulating similar events, I think that serves one aspect of policy making, but not entirely, because you get to speak about issues that are currently burning in the world. You make policies, you try to lobby, negotiate, and role play as certain individuals representing countries and world leaders. So, do you think that Model United Nations has something to offer when it comes to making policies? This is something just impromptu came to my mind.
It depends on the scope, right? I mean, when you look into the policy competitions, it's mostly about the national level policy making. It's about how we can sort of solve specific problems that are right now sort of affecting us. But I think the Model United Nations scope is a little bit broader, right? It's from the global perspective. I mean, in terms of understanding the role of negotiating, influence, bargaining, and everything, Model United Nations is very important. And because as far as I understand, when you participate in that, so if you try to sort of get one country or one member country in your proposal, that's where the horse trading, the bargaining, and everything will take place. And it's important to learn that. But again, I think scope is different. But in terms of understanding those art of policy making, probably Model United Nations is also have important things to offer.
All right, sir, we're almost at the end of our discussion. The final question that I have from you is, how can organizations such as YPF, Center for Policy Dialogue, South Asian Regional, I think it's SANEM in short, organizations such as that can make a bigger impact in terms of promoting the art of policymaking?
I think the first thing you need to understand is, each organization has to get a clear idea about where their strength lies. For instance, in case of SANEM, in case of CPD, their strength is in data generation. Their strength is in terms of evidence generations. YPF can have them, but it's not necessarily something that YPF will always strive on. So, it's understand that where the strength of this organization lies. The second thing is how they can complement each other. So, for instance, CPD or SANEM, I mean, they have done or they have completed, magnificent studies, important studies during the COVID period. We get a sense of the state of poverty. We get an understanding of the possible impact, a possible economic impact of COVID. We have understood that, where things are moving. We have understood about the governance challenges. We have understood that how the social protection services are being delivered, what are the problems. So those kind of things we have understood for them. But then the question is, you have that data. What you're going to do with that data? How this data can be incorporated within the policymaking process? I think this is where YPF's greatest strength actually comes into play. And I think this is something the organizations can complement each other. They can coordinate, they can collaborate with each other. And once you have that evidence, how can you use that? Because to be very frank with you, in terms of CPD and SANEM, once you have that data, we have seen that sometimes the government has reacted very angrily to that evidence, and once that happens, that becomes very difficult for the research organizations or think tanks to use that data and to influence the policy making process. So there is probably a kind of necessity to understand that how to present the findings in a way which the government will acknowledge, and at the same time we'll try to do those things. So this is where the collaboration among these organizations will become important. The third thing that I want to point out, these organizations will always play a bigger role, an important role in terms of creating an impact on the policy making. That instead of considering the government as someone who can be just simply poked or who can be making an enemy, that clear understanding that how can we work together? Where is the common ground? I understand that as an academic, there are some areas where I cannot compromise. There are some research findings, there are some ideas that it's given that we cannot agree with the government or any other bodies on that particular issues. Having said that, there is of course some common ground. There is some minimal acceptable ground where we can work together, where there are some common goals. We share purposes. We have a common understanding of those things, and these are the areas where it's possible to work together. And the last point that I want to point out, which YPF is already doing, and to some extent leading the way, is involving or incorporating the youth, which SANEM is also doing, CPD is also doing, and I know that organizations like BIGD, FES, and other think tanks are also doing that. So just sort of reaching out to them, have their voices, and because this is having a clear impact. Let me just end by giving one of the examples that, as
Yes,
you
sir.
mentioned at the beginning, that I was working in the government of Bangladesh National Adolescent Strategy development process. One of the things that we did as part of that strategy development process, we actually tried to reach out the adolescents all over the country. We had more than 200 FGDs with adolescents in different parts of the country to get their perspective. Because whenever we're talking about adolescent strategy, we need to listen to the adolescents, that what they expect, what they understand, what they say their challenges are, what they say their health related challenges are, what they say their education learning challenges are, protection challenges are, participation challenges are. So I think within the government, a certain understanding is actually going out that we need to listen to the youth, and at the same time to
Yep.
listen to the think tanks. That particular understanding has also grown within the government usually right now, before taking any policy, they organize a lot of stakeholder consultation where different think tanks participate, share their point of view. So that practice is growing. So I think this is where organizations like YPF, SANM, CPD is making a contribution, and we will see its benefit over the years.
Absolutely, sir. I must admit the fact that a lot of different youth within my own network are part of YPF, whether they're a fellow, whether they're one of the envoys from the grassroots networks,
Right.
or whether they're someone who's currently living outside of the country, but they still try to contribute by providing their support, knowledge, their participation through YPF. So that is really remarkable. And thank you so much for making time. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas, opinion, and sharing your knowledge towards the masses. That's all the discussion that we have today, and we hope to collaborate again with YPF someday soon. And sir, please don't leave. We will have a very short video about POMAC, because next time when we come live, we will hear from the winning teams and their experienced students who participate in such competitions. So we're going to play a short promo video and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for waiting there, sir. So we are proud to announce ourselves as one of the live streaming partners of POMAC, which already ended a week ago, and 3 teams were crowned champion, first runner-up and second runner-up, with a total prize pool of 200,000 Bangladeshi taka. So that it's also very good that companies such as Citibank, Shahan, corporate entities are coming forward and contributing towards this cause. So, sir, hopefully someday we will see more competitions are coming. Any closing remarks from you for formally wrapping this show up today?
No, I mean it's wonderful to be here. I mean, to sort of talk about those issues, and as you have pointed out that competitions are growing, but we need more involvement and more organizations. And I hope, I wish all the best. The competition that we're talking about. As I said, that this is the second time. I hope there will be third, fourth, and this will go on continuously, and we will get real insight, because we need those organizations, those institutions like POMAC to sort of move forward. Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Thanks again. Thanks to YPF Network and Shamaila for corresponding with me promptly, which is why we were able to organize this. So we take your leave, and hopefully someday soon we will have YPF's representation and more on the art of policy making. Take care, sir. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.